Hi there, I just wanted to go through this topic here of prohibition. Okay, this is going to be the start of the topic. There's going to be a couple of these here, but this one here is going to cover why prohibition happened. It's going to cover the people that agreed with it, people that wanted it, and the people obviously that didn't want it as well too. So there's quite a few pieces in here that we really need to get to grips with. Talk about get to grips with. Look at this picture here. You can see these guys in the background here. They're pouring out a huge vat of beer, okay, of alcohol, and they're pouring it straight down a drain, which you can't see in this picture, but they're pouring it straight down the drain. You can tell how much it is by the exertion on the people's faces. And behind, look at these very official-looking people. You've got definitely police. All the way behind here, and you have official looking people watching this being done. Okay, and this is part of prohibition in the 1920s when America decided just after World War One that they were going to get rid of alcohol. They're going to ban it once and for all, and they hoped that this would be a noble experiment that would change society forever. Now you may realize that that didn't have perhaps the desired effect, and there were a lot of repercussions for this, which we will look into as well too. Okay, so prohibition's got lots of things to it, which we'll start into. Alright, first of all, look at this picture here to start with. Okay, so it looks a very normal looking picture from the 1920s. It's been colorized, so it's a cafe scene. You've got Coca-Cola in the background, you've got little pictures on the wall, everything looks nice and rosy in the garden, but everything is just not as it seems, because the lady here has something with her, okay, which is one of these ingenious devices that many Americans happened to create at the time, and it's a cane that she carried around, and within the cane she actually had alcohol stashed, okay, and she could open the bottom, and whenever she's in this cafe, she can actually then pour a little bit of alcohol into her cup. Okay, so lots of Americans did not agree with prohibition, and they decided to find ways around it. And you would have had then millions of people who were actually, in essence, lawbreakers in America at this time. But it showed how the law didn't really work, and how it could be abused, and certainly people got around it. Alright, it also led to other problems as well too, which you may be aware of. So we have these people here. Now hopefully you may have actually seen some of these before, because these are hugely famous people in the 1920s, and some of these even nearly made Man of the Year in Time magazine. So this one here is Al Capone, a hugely famous gangster, 1920s. Would have actually killed people with his own hands or his own baseball bat. He killed a couple of people with his own baseball bat, and certainly responsible for the deaths of lots and lots of people in Chicago. Each of these people would have had their own areas of expertise and their own areas that they would have tried to keep control over, but the one thing that links them all is they would all have like connections with alcohol and trying to beat prohibition, because once you ban something it makes it actually very valuable, and that's what happened with alcohol. A lot of these people made vast amounts of money through the illegal distribution and production of alcohol, and they misused the money to control their areas as well too, through gangsterism, which America became notorious for in the 1920s. Alright, so prohibition itself. So prohibition actually had to have an American amendment. There's the American Constitution. It's over 250 years old, and there's only been 27 amendments made to that Constitution since it was actually produced way back in the 18th century. So the amendment for creating prohibition was one of these, and the amendment after this here to get rid of it was another. So this is the 18th Amendment, the very famous 18th Amendment, which actually states this: the manufacture, production, sale or transportation of intoxicating liquors, it's alcohol, within the importation thereof, so it's importing alcohol, or the exportation thereof, obviously exporting, from the United States and all the territories subject to the jurisdiction thereof, for beverage purposes is hereby prohibited. So for drinking purposes is prohibited. So this very famous piece of legislation prevented the alcohol from being manufactured, transported, and sold across the United States. So we look at these two keywords itself. The prohibition itself means to ban alcohol, and it's banned by the 18th Amendment in 1919. Okay, you've got two amendments you need to know. The 18th is the one for prohibition. You also need to know this, okay, so while this prohibits alcohol or bans alcohol, the next one here is the Volstead Act. So it's very specific, and it actually is the law that enforces this, okay? And what's very important about this Volstead Act is that it absolutely surprised a lot of Americans, because they realized that it was anything over 0.5%. That's very, very low. So anything over 0.5% was deemed illegal. So very, very low rating, okay? And this here would have really impacted on American life because it's such a low figure. Alright, so we need to look now at arguments for prohibition, okay? So this is the reasons why the people would have actually suggested prohibition would have been the way forward, and you need to know this here inside out, okay? So try to think of as many reasons as possible using our notes, using the BBC site, using our website. There's lots of reasons why prohibition would have been seen to be the way forward, and this is not just a new thing in 1919. This is goes way back to the end of the 19th century, and if not the mid 19th century. So you can see here it posters suggesting it leads to neglect of duty, moral degradation and crime. This person here is in a jail, okay, tending to point out that this is where it leads to. You have these lovely looking ladies here. It says, lips that touch liquor shall not touch ours, okay? I think there's not much chance of that with them anyway, but this is what it suggests, that these women in particular definitely are taking a high moral stance, and suggesting alcohol is not the way forward, especially for husbands, I suppose, too. So they're taking a stand on that. And women did actually have to say, women did really lead the move towards prohibition, okay, for many good reasons as well too, because women tended to be at the other end of things whenever it came to alcohol. Okay, you've got this soldier here too, so obviously appealing to patriotism, appealing to being American, okay, so it's almost like un-American to drink. And then you've got this down here, which is aiming to probably the paternal aspects of things, or maternal aspects, suggesting that it's a danger to the family to drink. And then here it's linking it up with lots of different obvious health problems as well too, okay. Okay, so let's go into these in a little bit more detail. Now, what I really want you to do is to watch this video. Okay, this is a brilliant video. It's one clip from it, I suppose. It's from a Ken Burns series on prohibition. It's absolutely amazing. There's 3 parts. It shows before prohibition, the things that led up to it. It shows the what happened during prohibition, and then sort of the consequences. So it's a 3-part documentary. I'm not wanting you to watch it all. If you watch this one here, this is really good, but if you did watch the rest of it, I'd say definitely be recommended viewing. I have to say, it's very good. Okay, so the first thing we want to look at for arguments for prohibition is World War One. World War One did change an awful lot of things. There'd been a movement towards prohibition well before World War One, but it was kind of this here was kind of the catalyst to really get it pushed across the line. Okay, and it was seen as a major turning point, as supporting prohibition was seen as patriotic, was seen as being, pro-American. During the war, all the reserves of grain, barley and wheat, things that would actually be used to make alcohol, were actually reserved towards the food effort and towards the war effort. A lot of it was sent across to Allied countries in Europe, and as a result of that, their demand did start to actually go down as well too. The other thing is, though, it brought out the other aspect of things, because many of the United States, many of the top brewers in America were German. Okay, there's millions of German Americans, and companies like Budweiser, they were like the targets of anti-German feeling, and a lot of people just didn't go or didn't drink German beer because of the war. And it's not just Germans, other immigrant groups as well, the Irish, I suppose, as well too. A lot of these, remember we did look at this here, that they were looked down upon, and a lot of immigrant groups had drinking cultures. A lot of them had left their homes, and I suppose where they met up was at the local bar, local pub, local saloon. So drinking became an important part of their lives, and people in America, especially perhaps the WASP community, would have really looked upon this here as being one of the things that jailed immigrants together, and they didn't really like immigrants. Okay, so that's the first point about World War One. The second point we would have here then is about morals and religion. So groups like the Anti-Saloon League were set up. They stressed the damage that alcohol did to family life. You would have lots of other religious groups as well too, set up to campaign against alcohol and campaign for prohibition, and they strongly condemned drunkenness. One of the most famous preachers in America who attracted thousands and thousands of people was Billy Sunday. Billy Sunday was a reformed alcoholic. He was a baseball player, a very famous baseball player who became a preacher, and he really did speak against the negative effects of alcohol in quite blazing sermons, and this really did help push America across the prohibition line. Then next you've got the 1920s, and we have looked at the economics. So it's productivity. So factory owners, big employers like Henry Ford himself, they were actually really supportive of the idea of prohibition, because they really did feel that it really did affect productiveness, and it led to absenteeism in their factories. So they wanted to prevent that. It has to be said, I mean, if you look at the videos, you will see that alcoholism and dependence on alcohol use was far more prevalent back in the 1900s, 1920s than it is now. Much more prevalent. So it would have led to a lot of these issues of productivity and absenteeism. So he's pushing for this to actually go through. And then obviously the health benefits. Okay, even still today, people would argue about the health benefits of getting rid of alcohol, or certainly reducing their alcohol content. So the American Medical Association, a very big organisation, supported prohibition because they knew that it led to liver disease and various other diseases as well too. So they campaigned for it. And then these huge campaigns, again, a lot of them led by women's groups who became absolutely stoic in their progress towards getting rid of alcohol. So this temperance movement that we call, this word's really important for you guys, temperance movement. Temperance means to, well, get rid of, eliminate alcohol. It's been going up since the 19th century, but it reached its heights during this time as well too. And you've got really big one, the Women's Christian Temperance Union. This group here especially, since the 19th century, they have been campaigning endlessly for alcohol to be prohibited. Okay, and they use posters, they use songs, they use poems. They were highly effective at motivating public interest. And you can tell here it's women's rights together with so this Christian unity as well too propelled them towards getting this as a success. Alright, so that is arguments for. There are lots of arguments against prohibition as well too, and this is a very vocal group of people who tried to actually stop prohibition from happening as well too. Okay, not least the beer companies. So you can see these pictures as well too, just about being American. It was actually patriotic to actually maybe not drink beer, but certainly to stand up for your freedom to drink beer. Okay, it was seen as very backward if you're actually prohibiting something. You can see here as well, this is some of the posters that the beer companies would put up. So obviously making it very clear the consequences that like shops would shut, bars would shut, people would be unemployed, breweries would close down. So that there's clearly like an idea they're putting across. There's also the idea that beer is actually quite good for you in small doses, I suppose. So it actually is suggesting this as well too. And you have here about the tax. A lot of the tax that they actually produced in America was used to go into public revenues as well too. So there is definitely two sides. So let's look at this in a bit more detail. So employment first of all. The brewing companies, huge in Midwest. Think about your agriculture as well too. You know from your agriculture that wheat and barley, because the demand fell for that there due to prohibition, it leads to a massive depression amongst agricultural communities. So brewing companies obviously opposed to prohibition, and they launched a huge advertising campaign arguing that prohibition would cost many jobs, not just in making the beer, but in even the likes of barrel producers, transportation. You have huge amounts of ancillary industries that actually are dependent on the brewing industry. Then you've got taxes as well too. So again, you have the Citizens Committee here set up, and it emphasised how essential taxes were. In fact, it wasn't actually pushed through earlier because of the amount of tax it provided America, but in the early 1900s there was an income tax passed, and that there tried to provide perhaps some of the revenue to replace what might be lost through prohibition. Then you've got the health. Okay, so some companies would argue that there was moderate use of beer actually brought health benefits. This has a little bit of truth in it in some respects, because the water supply in America, as across the world, wasn't very reliable, and sometimes you could get lots of waterborne diseases at that time. So beer, drinking like weak beer, actually did protect you an awful lot more than perhaps the local water supply. So there is an element of truth in that, I suppose. And then rights. Okay, so again, just like today, there's this huge battle over rights, and a lot of Americans want their freedom to do whatever they want. Okay, and they do not like having their freedoms violated. And groups such as the Anti-Dry League, Good Fellows of America, they argue that prohibition violated their rights and their freedoms. They've come to the land of the free, but they're not free to do something as simple as have a beer with their mates. Okay, so this is like all to do with fundamental rights. So this is the arguments against prohibition. Okay, right, I wanted you to do this exam question then. So an exam question is very simple. Why did people believe prohibition was a good idea in 1919? Okay, it's an 8 marker. So and what you need to do there for this is just to have an opening sentence, outline 3 reasons that you're going to discuss, very briefly outline these, and then you have 3 short paragraphs. Each paragraph has to have a point. Then you have to give the detailed information backing up that point, and then explain the link to the question. Okay, so why this led people to agree with prohibition, and finally you conclude the most important reasons. Make a judgment and why you think that is the most important reason. So you've got 12 minutes usually to answer this type of question in an exam. Try to do this and do it well. Okay, you can have a model answer to refer back to for revision. Okay, I hope this is useful. Thanks very much for listening.